The Exchange on Deep Dive.
On tonight's edition of The Exchange, the impact of polluted water in Harare is our topic of discussion. Now, I'm joined in the studio and over the line by my guest tonight. Linda Mujuru is a senior reporter with Global Press Journal and the author of the article that we'll be discussing this evening. Linda, good evening and thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Rumbi. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. We're also joined by Good Life Mudzingwa. He's the national coordinator of Community Water Alliance. Good Life, good evening and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, evening listeners, evening everybody.
Right. So I mean, it's important for us to get into this conversation by starting off with you, Linda, and giving us the context here. Tell us about the story that you did, some of the important details and the motivation behind it.
Thank you, Rumbi. So I'll start with the motivation. I'm sure listeners will be wondering why I wrote this story. So I'm a girl who grew up in Norton, and fish formed part of our diet growing up. We would always eat fish. So one day I visited my father who is living there, and I asked someone who was selling fish whether they're still getting the same amount of fish in the Lake Chiwero and Tawendo Dam. And what they told me shocked me and really motivated this research and basically this story. And they told me that, you know what, we are not getting as much fish as we used to get there. So driven by my desire to tell stories, not only just general stories, but stories with impact, I decided to delve deeper into this issue and investigate. And what I found was really something shocking, and it is impactful on people's livelihoods. Like I mentioned, Norton is a town that depends on this fishing community to survive, and also as a source of protein. So in investigating, I found out that there was a lot of phosphates in the water that was being disposed into the water bodies by the Norton Town Council and a local Chinese manufacturing company. What we did is we investigated, we took some water samples to really determine the impact this water has, not just talk from a general point of view, but also to look at the specifics, what was in the water. So we engaged an independent lab, and that lab told us that there was a high level of phosphates in this water. So when we talk about phosphates, it's basically something that you'd find in fertilizers. So naturally, the environment is a receptor of waste, but then too much of this waste is damaging to the environment. So it's basically like putting a lot of fertilizer to a plant. Imagine what will happen to that plant. So this is the issue with the phosphates. So the main source of phosphates is the sewage. So this is the amount of phosphates that we found. So we basically took two samples of water, one from the Chinese company and one from the Norton Town Council, the water that they released to the environment after cleaning it, or they are supposed to clean it. So we found out that the water from the Chinese company contained 6 times more phosphates than that is required by the EMA. And the water from the Norton Town Council contained 12 times more than what is required. So basically, it's sewage within our water bodies.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll stop you there for now. And let that sink in. Good Life come in there. The findings coming out of Linda's investigation and that story, is this a common phenomenon, in Zimbabwe and in Harare's water bodies?
Yeah, I would say in Harare, it's common, it's known because of the site of the city. The city is built upstream of its water source. So all the pollution that happens upstream finds its way downstream. And just like what Linda found out, we have challenges around untreated raw sewer that is discharged into our streams that feed into Lake Chiwero, which is the main water body in Harare. So you'd find that sewer, for example, from Korobo plant in Chitungwiza, and also from Norton, as she has highlighted, they are not treating the wastewater up to standard. And you find a lot of these, I would say, human waste, untreated human waste, finding its way downstream to the lake. So it's something that is common, I would say, not common in terms of being normal. No, it's a fact that is known, which emanate from the two issues that I've alluded to. Number one, the site of the city vis-a-vis the positioning of the water source, and secondly, the inadequacy of local authorities to treat wastewater before it is discharged into the environment.
So, in other words, Good Life, we are swimming in sewage.
Yes, if you go to the lake and you see a lot of hyacinth that is growing in the lake, that's an expression of the, what we are actually talking about, and also the findings that came from Linda's article. So, sewer is the situation, sewer is the reality in terms of what's happening downstream there.
Oh, goodness me. If you're as shocked as I am, and I know the listeners certainly are, this is a story that matters and we need to talk about it. Good Life, thanks so much for giving us perspective there. Linda, coming back to you. So, I mean, obviously, a few critical questions. Who is discharging raw sewage, into the water? And then when you went into, I mean, I know that you did have an opportunity to speak to the manufacturing company as well as the tire manufacturing company as well as the Norton Council on this. What are their responses to also adding to the problem?
Okay, so when it comes to who is polluting the water, the city council is one. So when I spoke to them, they basically mentioned two important things. Number one, the electricity issue. They said that their sewage treatment plant depends on electricity. So what happens is when there is no electricity, their storage tanks may fill up, and if electricity does not come, they are forced to dispose that water as it is into the lake. They have no option. Number two, the issue of finances. So the city indicated that they do not have money to buy or purchase state-of-the-art equipment to process or clean the water. So the sewer plant that is there at Norton Town Council can only clean water up to 50%. So you find that issues or contamination related to phosphates and other nutrients will find their way into the lake because of the inefficient water purification systems that they have. The one that they have is from Longpeg and is the only one that they have had over the years. But then being efficient, that processing plant is not efficient. And then when it comes to the Chinese manufacturing company, they indicated that, sometimes there is a lot of demand for the product that they sell, and that demand coupled with production can lead to overproduction, and sometimes there is mechanical failures and water goes out there. But then from our tests and from conversations with Emma, they indicated that the phosphates is actually coming from the toilet. When it comes to tile manufacturing, the company is a culprit in terms of disposing water that is heavy in metals such as manganese. So there are two issues there when it comes to the company. Issues to do with contamination from the water that comes from the tile manufacturing, and also issues to do with water that is coming from their toilets, basically.
And now, Good Life, I want to come back to you. The organization that you represent, Water Alliance. What role has Water Alliance played in any part of this? I mean, in terms of coming in, from a regulatory perspective or addressing some of the issues that are raised here. What has your role been, or your key role in all this?
Thanks very much. I think you would find that the findings by Linda have implications in terms of access to water, particularly around affordability of water services. because where you have a lot of discharge of sewer and other industrial waste into water bodies, it has to be met with corresponding water treatment chemicals, and that has got a bearing on the price of water at the tap. So in terms of what we have been doing, the first issue that we have done is to engage in terms of engage the relevant authorities so that we look at, number one, reviewing of the law around pollution. So we have the polluter pay principle, which is contained in the EMA Act and the relevant statutory instruments and policies relating to the environment. But the challenge that we have with the current polluter pay principle is that, number one, the amount is not punitive enough to prevent pollution. So you'd find that for companies,
maybe for context, sorry to come in there, Good Life, just tell us exactly what it currently says and what does the polluter pay principle mean, in practical terms.
Okay, so the polluter pay principle means that if you pollute, you are supposed to pay a particular amount that is determined by the Environmental Management Agency. And that amount is collected by EMA. And our thinking as an organization is that it is supposed to cater for a remedy. So, like I've said, it's a principle that says or everybody who, or an institution that pollutes will pay a fine for a particular pollution that they have done in the environment. So that's the polluter pay principle. But like I have said, the challenge that we have is that the amount that is being charged is not punitive enough to prevent pollution. So for institutions that are running particular companies that want to make profit, it is cheaper to pollute and pay rather than to prevent pollution in terms of the cost. And just like what Linda talked about, where you have mass production that is happening and the drive is towards maximization of profit, it's better to pollute for them, you see, and then pay the fines that are not punitive enough. So that's the first challenge. So we are pushing for review in terms of the punitive charges. And then the second is the framework itself, where pollution is turned out to be like a fundraising for those institutions that are implementing the principle. Because we have not seen investment in terms of remedying the challenge at hand. So the money is collected, yes, and it's not adequate, like I said, but it's not plowed back in terms of preventing pollution, like remedying the challenges that are at hand in terms of pollution of the water. So in terms of what we are doing, I think you are aware that in the last parliament and even the legislative reform, that was the legislative agenda that was formulated by government, review of the EMA Act was one such issue. So among some of the demands that we've been making as an institution is to look at the polluter pay principle, reforming the framework, and number two, the charges. That is, we'll be looking at the provisions in the EMA Act, laying foundation for whatever statutory instruments that will be issued by the line ministry to ensure that we address that challenge. Number two is also engagement of those institutions. And advocating, particularly on government, to give certain, benefits for those that are showing concern to the environment for companies. And the last one, we have been pushing for increased fiscal commitment towards WASH. Because if you look at WASH, you are looking at water, sanitation, and hygiene. And one issue that Linda pointed out on sewer is a sanitation issue. So if we continue to have percent or 1.2% as has been the case allocated to wash at national level, we'll continue to have problems because, issues of access to water, issues of sanitation, these are huge capital projects that require a lot of money. You cannot expect local authority to have the necessary budgetary instruments to support such sanitation intervention. So we call upon the relevant ministry at national level to help local authorities to deal with these challenges so that we increase even capacity. But the other issue that we have, colleagues, is we have limited capacity of the sewer treatment plants to contain what is being generated. I think you are aware that these sewer treatment plants were created when we had very limited, we have very few people staying in the metropolitan province. Right now we have got millions that are staying in the metropolitan province, and we have had not a corresponding expansion in terms of the capacity of the sewer treatment plants in line with that. And so the other issue that we've been pushing is to ensure that we have a meaningful budget towards water and sanitation from central government, or at least devolution, where funds at national level are devolved in terms of their allocations to cater for the immediate needs at the ground. So I think those are part of what we've been doing as an institution, as well as citizen engagement, because to ensure that locals engage their local councillors, parliamentarians, and relevant authorities, even the industries that we are talking about, so that at least there is consent for human-centered development mindset for everyone.
Thanks so much, Good Life, for outlining some of those very key points and the call to action at the end there. Now, Linda, I want to come back to you in the studio. Of course, we'll hear from you as well on your recommendations. But, your story touched a lot on the fishing community, and I think there are two aspects. How do the phosphates affect the fishing community in terms of the fish themselves? And then obviously we then look at some of the other knock-on effects on the human users of the water as well.
So when it comes to the phosphates, how it affects the fishing community, I'll give you a story of one of the sources that I speak to in the story. His name is Paul Majoni, and he indicates that he has been fishing for the past 12 years. That's how he survives. That's how he takes care of his 4 children, right? And in the past 12 years, let's say around 2011, thereabout, he used to catch about 50 kgs of fish. But now if he catches around 15 kgs, he considers himself lucky. Why? Because of the depleting number of fish within the lake and within the dam. So phosphates, what they essentially do is they reduce the amount of oxygen that is there in the water. You know that fish can breathe in water because there is oxygen there, right? If you have ever been to Lake Chivero or Tawendo Dam, you have seen this green plant that we call algae that is there on the top and covers part of the water. That plant is driven, or it survives through phosphates. So that plant reduces the amount of oxygen within water, thereby, one, affecting the quality of fish and also affecting the quantity of fish. So what essentially this fish has told me is that in the past years, they used to catch what they call tiger fish, for instance, but now they cannot find that type of fish in the water. And also the quality of the fish. I've often heard people joking around and say they don't eat fish from Lake Chivero because it's full of sewage, I'm sure you have heard of that, right? So that's essentially the effect on livelihoods of people, because this is a huge industry where people survive on. So it affects how people survive, people like Paul Majoni that I mentioned. And also there is also risk of contamination. If you eat a contaminated fish, it may affect you because it has phosphates. And phosphates, too much of phosphates are not good for the human being. It may affect your bone information. It may weaken your bonds and ultimately may increase the chances of you having a heart attack. Or it has huge implications on the human beings. And also, let's just look at the nutrition side. I mentioned earlier that I grew up in Norton and we used to eat a lot of fish, and we loved that. It's a way of people to access protein. But then if that industry is also affected, it means that people who survive on this, people who survive on fish to get the much needed protein are also affected. So it's a whole area of impact that is coming from this contamination. And just to give you some bit of context, in 2022, a report by the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture indicated that 2017, Zimbabwe overall produced about 24,000 metric tons of fish. But this has been depleting over years. And in 2020, that figure reduced to 19,000. So it has been decreasing over time. Obviously, yes, pollution is one other item that is influencing the decrease of fish, but there are also other factors such as climate change and also overfishing. But we cannot ignore the impact that water pollution is having on this industry, on people, on people's livelihoods, on people's health, and that is really important to highlight.
Indeed, it is. The numbers are 0719 100 404. Whether you are living within the Norton community or outside it, but we know that Lake Chivero is a major water body, major water source, and we are all affected by this. And it's important that you listen to this conversation as we now venture into the last segment, where we want to look at recommendations and a call to action in terms of what can we do in the meantime to fix some of these issues. So, Linda, I want to come back to you then. I mean, what can communities start to do, from that level to address some of the issues that you raise?
Well, essentially, communities can organize themselves and make sure that they highlight these issues to their local authorities, to representatives in parliament, to the mayor, and so forth. But most importantly, my advice would go to journalists, because I'm a journalist. I'm not a politician. So I'll speak to something that I know. Absolutely, something that I love, which is journalism. So as journalists, we have a role to play. We shouldn't just look at issues, with a limited spectrum into issues. We should investigate issues. These issues to do with the environment are issues that are of importance, issues that affect people who are living within the communities, issues that are also affecting us, because we cannot ignore the fact that we are also living here. We also eat fish from Norton, you see. So it's really important that as journalists, we write stories that are meaningful, stories that highlight the day-to-day struggles of people, and not just ignore these issues, because they are happening within our communities and we need to highlight them.
I like that. Also, let's touch on some of the environmental issues whilst on that journalism angle. What should change in the reporting to impact these environmental issues? Any words for journalists out there on those aspects as well?
For me, it's the consequence, the impact of issues. It's one thing indicating that, people are fishing from Lake Chivero, people are fishing from, Dawindel Dam. But what is the impact of certain things that happen within society? We have seen this tile and manufacturing company. We have seen Norton Town Council is there. But what is the impact of the work that they're doing? What is the impact of things that they're supposed to be doing that they are not doing? What is the impact on the general person that is there? What is the impact on Paul Majoni, for instance, a man who is trying to survive and take care of his 4 kids? So we should look beyond events. We should look beyond issues, but delve deeper into what are the consequences of such action. And as journalists, we are not just, gullible receivers of information. He said, she said that. But then what is the consequence of all this? Because it's people at the end of the day, it's people and their lives matter, so we are supposed to look at that. So in terms of the environmental issues, when you look at climate change, people are talking about climate change, but what is it? To a layman, what does it mean? What does it mean to my crops? Now the rains have fallen, but the meteorological department is saying that you shouldn't plant now.
They say just wait. Yes.
Yeah. So you see, but what is the impact? And we are supposed to make these issues clear and simple for the general people living out there.
I like that. So big challenge for journalists there. Hanzi Chimbosiana Ninyaz Mjoloji. Let's focus on environmental issues that impact lives. So thanks so much for highlighting that. Good life. Let's talk a little more about what can be done to curb these issues, recommendations and so forth. I mean, in terms of lobbying, has anything been done in terms of taking perhaps the environmental agency to task on some of these issues, highlighting, that it's a constitutional, socio-economic right to have clean and potable water, for example?
Thank you very much. I think there are quite a wide range of interventions that can be done. Just like what Linda pointed out at the first. The first issue is to ensure that we build an informed citizenry that is affected by issues that we are talking about. Those that are in Norton, those that are in Harare, the residents of Norton, as well as the residents of Harare, and all those who consume water that is being contaminated. We need to ensure that these people are informed and have the necessary information around the implication of this pollution, both on their health and also in terms of them paying for the cost of purifying. Because for every phosphate, for every contamination that happens in the water bodies, it's a burden on residents as they pay the water charges. And the cost of water is determined by, the chemicals that are used to purify water. So the first issue is to ensure that we've got an informed citizen. And number two, there are governance issues that we need to focus on. The first one is to ensure that there is coordination amongst the key institutions that deal with issues of water pollution. Right now, we've got a challenge of what I would call lack of coordination of the key institutions that are supposed to deal with prevention of pollution. So every institution is operating in silo. Local authorities have got a role in terms of ensuring that their sewer treatment plans are up to standard. EMA has got a role. We also have key ministries that also regulate even the operations of businesses, like the ones that the business that Linda talked about. So we need to reform the institutional framework. That is the first key governance issue that we need to focus on. The second one is dealing with review of the law, regulations, and policies around water pollution. This is just one issue that we are focusing on. Remember, we have got also pollution in terms of contamination of water bodies nationally. Mercury, for example, is being discharged within water bodies at national level. On those also that are dealing with mining. So we need to ensure that we revisit the law, the EMA Act. One of the issues that should be prominent in terms of the review of the EMA Act is tightening provisions around prevention of water pollution and ensuring that regulations and statutory instruments are punitive in terms of their charges. They have got punitive charges that prevent pollution. And also the money that is generated needs to focus on improving raw water so that at least we don't have challenges of, fish that are all mammals that stay in water, just like what Linda talked about. And ultimately also water, potable water that is accessed by residents at the tap. So the second issue is around law. Reform is around reform of policies, is around reform of regulations, is around reform of statutory instruments. The other issue that I've alluded to lastly, citizen engagement, is one issue that is very important. And also public interest litigation. Because you find that in most cases, where these people have not got a cost in terms of court judgment that ensure that they pay not only to EMA but also to those that are being affected, the general public. If there is no such remedies, they will continue polluting. So public interest litigation also is at the disposal of citizens to prevent pollution. Then the other issue is human resource capacity. We need to deal with building the capacity of human resource, the financial capacity of local authorities to ensure that they are up to standard when it comes to building adequate standards at the sewer treatment plant. And that speaks to the national budget. We have argued as an organization over time that this culture of allocating around 1.2% of the national budget to issues of wash is not doing good to everyone, both those that have money and those who do not have money. So I think that we need to focus on increasing the national budget at least to 15%. It has to be allocated towards wash. Right now, we have an outbreak of cholera as we speak. Cholera in Boera, cholera in Harare, cholera in Chimanimani. These are issues of wash. And the reason why we continue to have these challenges is because we are not committing enough resources towards that. So the national cake, in terms of the budget, should be committed towards improving access to wash. Those are some of the innovations that I think if we focus on them, they are pertinent. Right now we are in the process of budget submission. And Parliament will sit to pass the budget in December. The budget, which is a legal document, which governs how government will spend money in 2024. So if that is not, echoed in the budget, as it will be passed in December this year, we'll continue to have these challenges. And lastly, those that have got a responsibility are called to task.
Absolutely. Now, I wonder, Good Life, you've spoken about the policy makers as well as, the gatekeepers and the responsibility on them. But comment a little bit on what private players or some of the other entities within. We seem to have lost him. But maybe I can direct that question to you, Linda, in terms of what role do the private players play? Where do they come in, if at all? Because it seems, yes, I know the policymakers and gatekeepers are ultimately responsible, but we can't just sit back and wait for them to do everything. Is there room there for private players, for triple Ps to come in and do something as well?
There is room. There is room for private players to come in and help, but the responsibility lies with government, with local authorities, to make sure that people have access to water. If I do not have access to clean water in my house, I look at the government, not private players. But definitely private players have to come in to help, to support the government. But the owners, we cannot remove the responsibility from government. So the role here is with government. And I just wanted to add on this issue that Hard Life mentioned regarding the chemicals that are used in terms of water purification. In my investigation, I got information from the City Council that they use about 2 to 3 million each month to purify water, and they
United States dollars.
Yes, they use about 9 chemicals to purify water. But after all that purification, the water is too not of good quality to drink.
It's still at 50%.
Yes. So this contamination that is happening is so difficult for even the Harare City Council to treat the water up to human drinking standards. Yeah.
Wow, shocking, shocking indeed. Those are scary revelations, actually.
Yes,
and when you think about the fact that it's just coming out anyway because nothing can be done about it, I think is very, very worrisome for me, and we definitely need to continue this conversation with some of those parties present to answer to some of these issues, or like Good Life was saying there, that the need for strategic litigation. There need to be residents who come together and say, okay, we are residents of this particular community, and so on, to push the envelope further. Now, I've got a question here that's coming from one of our listeners, who says, hi Rumbi, I hear your guest highlighting the quality and quantity of output of fish has declined over time. How has illegal fishing or poaching affected the quantity coming through your official system? The players have increased, especially on the poaching side. So, Linda, quick comment. The poaching coming in as well, and how does that swing things?
Okay. I think earlier on I mentioned that there are basically three issues here when it comes to the depletion of fish within our water borders. Number one, which is water pollution. Two, climate change. And number three, overfishing. I think poaching comes into play on the issue of overfishing. So we cannot blame pollution only when it comes to the depletion of fish in our water borders, but there's essentially a lot of factors at play, and some of them are the ones that I've already mentioned.
And now, key recommendations going forward. I mean, what do you recommend can be done to really look into this situation?
Okay, I'll highlight the key recommendations coming from the issues that the Northern Town Council mentioned. I think the issues to do with outdated equipment that they're using to purify the sewage, the air sewage treatment plant, I think those are supposed to be upgraded so that we have state-of-the-art equipment that can purify water and remove all the nutrients, including phosphates, that we find in water. And when it comes to companies that are polluting the environment, I think it's really important to have, a separate court that deals with environmental issues. One of the key issues that EMA representatives mentioned when I was doing this story is that the issues to do with environmental, like if they take a government institution or a council to court, the issues or the case is put on ordinary roll, meaning that it will just follow every other case of someone, Kaba Kumusha or something like that. But it's not a priority. So Emma did take the Northern Town Council to court at some point, but till today there hasn't been any ruling regarding that. So I think going forward is really important to make issues to do with the environment a priority, so that offenders or polluters of the environment are dealt with within the courts, and also make the fines something that they don't do again. Make sure that the fines are hefty so that they don't repeat these crimes. Because one of the key issues that was mentioned is that this particular Chinese company has a tendency of making temporary measures whenever they are caught by EMA. These temporary measures do not deal with the problem. The problem continues, persists, and it happens again. So it's really important to have measures that are strong, measures that deter this tendency of polluting the environment.
Indeed, and I do hope that we can also continue in this new governance cycle to push some of these issues, with the fresh perspective we hope that the parliamentarians now have, or the recently elected parliamentarians have, to push some of these issues forward. Unfortunately, we lost Good Life on the phone, but we do thank him for being part of this conversation. Now, as we close off, Linda, your parting shot, and I look forward to reading more impactful articles from you that really, prime us into action. I know you've also written about mining and what happens in mining communities, issues to do with women, healthcare, maternal health, and so forth. But in bringing this particular conversation to a close around polluted water, what would your parting shot be?
My parting shot would be that as residents, we need to be informed. We need to access information out there, and that's part of our role as journalists. But you need to have a knack to access information as residents, because I believe that if someone is informed, they're in a better position to negotiate for a better life, for better access to service delivery. So as citizens, we are supposed to look for information out there, and we are supposed to speak out when something doesn't make sense. When water is greenish, like in color, don't keep quiet. talk about it, report to someone, because at the end of the day, it will affect you and your family. So it's really important to do that. And lastly, I would like to encourage citizens to just go and read some of the stories that are and that are written by other local reporters from Zimbabwe on www.globalpressjournal.com. Thank you.
Linda. Thanks so much, Linda. Really appreciate this, and I think we can do more of this because this was really, really impactful, and I know a lot of people will be asking the right questions going further. Many thanks to my guests this evening, Linda Mujuru, who is a senior reporter with Global Press Journal. She wrote an article around what is happening in Norton with the polluted water and the fish depleting in the dam that has brought up so many issues to light. And we're also speaking to Good Life Mudzingwa, National Coordinator of Community Water Alliance. Many thanks to Linda and to Good Life. Good night.